You ever want to talk about a cool piece of lore from two pieces of fiction that you've been a fan of for a long time, but haven't played it in so long that your knowledge has atrophied more than a career Discord mod's legs? How about from a pair of companies so litigious that it honestly kind of scares you at the prospect of using their official artwork? Well, this episode, I'm stretching that knowledge again and lubing up for the double team, because we're going to be talking about the most important and controversial parts of Games Workshop's Warhammer Fantasy and Wizards of the Coast Dungeons and Dragons 5.5e, their magic systems. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Waitat. We're back, and in about the same time as last time. Before we get into the episode proper, I want to thank you so much for listening. It means the world to have you here, and for my voice to be bouncing around in your skull. Also, sorry I still haven't spruced things up in here. We're in the hot season in my area, and I'm not built for the summer, as you can probably tell. But we have all the normal updates. Make sure to share the show with your friends, like, comment, subscribe, and also make sure to check out Win Kashika and Mystic Luna. You might catch me in Win's chat, and you will absolutely catch me with pretty jewelry. But with that, let's talk about magic. Okay, so the place we should start before we start swapping magic is talking about what these magics are. And since it's a much larger topic, we'll start with Warhammer Fantasy's magic system. Now, in Warhammer, magic comes in a wind that blows from the North and South poles, because some ancient all-powerful super space frogs built portals through hell, and they fucking exploded. Now, a gross oversimplification of the Great Calamity aside, the magic that comes from these portals begins as a single wind. Dar, the source of dark magic. Now, dark magic is everything from demonic spells to necromancy to the spells cast by the Dark Elves. And these are all different forms of magic, but have this in common. And Dar spells rip apart reality as you cast them, corrupting and mutating both the caster and the world around them as they're cast. With things like necromancy aging you, rotting you, and turning you into a smelly, ugly old man, while Slaanesh, Tzeentch, and Nurgle magic turns you into one of three different kinds of Redditor. Dark Elf magic doesn't actually affect Dark Elves negatively, since they're innately magic. Except maybe make them more sadistic, but they like that. But as Dar emerges from the poles, it flows in the world into the 8 winds of magic. Magic that is then used by basically everyone in some combination. Either a specific named magic, a specific lore of magic specific to their race or culture, and Quaish, which is high magic. High magic is refined and purified magic that combines all 8 again and can call on any combination of their powers, which is so incredibly powerful that only Slann and High Elves are the ones able to do it, because they're the ones that can handle it. But regardless, magic is both incredibly difficult to use and very dangerous, since you're essentially dealing with aspects of chaos. Now, the reason why people can't usually learn multiple types or have a particular ability in one form but not the others is because each form of magic has its own form, philosophy, and style. So to use both shadow and light magic, you need to master the philosophy and metaphysical concepts behind them, as well as the spell language and movements. Now, let's talk about what all the winds are. Starting with Hysh, which is also known as the Lore of Light or the Elemental Wind of Light. This lore of magic is a representation of light, both physical light and abstract meanings of the word, like stuff like purity and enlightenment. Heish is also about wisdom, patience, and contemplation. And that's because Heish is very hard for people with the ability to see magic, called witch sight, to see. Heish accumulates in very bright places around light sources, but also around things that operate in harmony, order, and predictability. Because it's the least chaotic and safest wind of magic. But it's also hard to use and control because it's intangible and has a low level of concentration anywhere because it so easily permeates through things. Meaning that practitioners, called Hierophants or White Wizards, have to have incredible focus, determination, clarity, and purity, which means it's pretty commonly used ritualistically with geometric shapes and music to draw it in. Also, Heish has some control over stone and earth, since it permeates into the ground and is absorbed into predictable geometric features and places with plenty of light. And also, Heish is particularly good at exorcism, abjuration, healing, and illumination. Next is Shaman, which, besides sounding like something Michael Jackson would say, is the lore of metal, the iron winds, the elemental wind of metal, or alchemy. This form of magic is focused on transmutation, creation, and investigation. Shaman is attracted to heavy and dense elements. The denser the material, the more shaman around it. Which is why metal, especially gold and lead, have high levels of it. It is also a magic of logic and experiments, which affects the casters, making them logical, dry, scientific, rigid, and set in their ways. Gold wizards, aka alchemists, are able to transform things into other things, create elements, or are able to use shaman to identify the properties of objects and how they're used. But they can also enchant things with magic, turn your normal weapons into a magic weapon, or your gold coins into lead bullets. And all of these are usually temporary, meaning you don't even lose your money. Next we have Gyrin, also known as the Lore of Life, Druid Lore, Storm Winds, or the Elemental Wind of Water. This wind of magic flows from the Chaos Wastes and through all living things. The bigger, more complex, the more magic that flows through them. Gyrin moves like water, and also just so happens to like water, meaning casters, called druids or green wizards, can also control water. Gyrin controls growth, nourishment, fertility, life, and vitality. It's also usually considered part of the natural spirit of the land, and is drawn towards childbirth, high fecundity, and also animals in general as they move and live. Basically, anywhere with a large number of living things, including plants, will have Gyrin. Gyrin also pools in water and flows wherever water does. Spellcasters who use Gyrin have a close connection to the natural world and tend to live as close as possible to nature and life, be it in a forest to a well-manicured grove to even a farm. And people oftentimes like to have them around because they help grow fields, help babies be born, and animals get bigger faster. Then there's Azir, the lore of heavens, the meteor winds, or the elemental wind of stone, which is confusing and misleading because Azir doesn't control rocks, unless it's meteors. Azir flows high in the air, crackling across the sky like lightning, and it's distorted by the movements of celestial bodies, space-time, and places of importance. Azir flows randomly across time too, meaning its casters, astromancers, or celestial wizards, can use it to see the future. Azir is all about the skies, the unknown and unseen, and divination. You can also use it to manipulate the air and winds, create and banish storms, create lightning bolts, predict the movements of the stars, and see through time. You can also use it to see just about anywhere in the world, and I am currently using it to look in your windows. Let me in. Please. Azir lets you call down meteors, too, for what it's worth. Now, while astromancers can see into the future, they can't really change it. And sure, they can predict weather and control the skies and stuff like that. They also do boring real-world stuff like math. In fact, a lot of the ways you have to learn Azir is they're using calculations, math, and statistics to use your spellcraft. I'm no longer interested. Next is Ulgu, which is lore of shadow, phantasmy, or the elemental wind of darkness. It collects in dark places, fog, shadows, and places of mystery or deceptions. And the magic of Olgu is based around deception, changing perceptions, causing confusion, invisibility, traveling through hidden places, and using shadows and secrets as actual physical weapons. The Grey Wizards are hard to remember, hard to see, and are often undetected in day-to-day life. And while, yes, you can do terrible and evil things with this, a lot of the times, the people with this magic fight against evil and chaos just as much as people with Heish do. Olgu may seem dark and evil, but remember that not all mysteries and secrets are bad things. Like Santa. Your parents just don't want you to know about Comrade Claus's political posts on Twitter. But you're also not wrong to see them as evil, since they are the second closest to dark magic. Olgu is going to be our big one this episode, just as a warning. Speaking of close to dark magic, Shyish. Also called the Lore of Death, Spirit Lore, Spirit Wind, or the Elemental Wind of Spirits. This wind of magic may seem like it's just about death, but that's just the easiest one. Because Shyish is about decay, entropy, and transitions. So yes, death, but also change and development. It is the unknown and facing the unknown, and pools and places that have met their end, are about to meet their end, where people have ended, or where people dread, or places where something has met its doom. And this can be everything from a fallen city to a graveyard, to a monastery where people have accepted their deaths, or a battlefield. Shyish is also kind of weird, because it also represents and is a manifestation of the metaphysical idea of reverence, awe, things that are solemn and sacred, and anything you approach with trepidation. Meaning especially old locations, sites of important events, and culturally important relics also have Shyish around them. Shyish also has some connections to fate and destiny because it travels through time, and for someone who uses it, called an amethyst wizard or a spiriter, they can see how long you have left to live if you've stopped growing and developing. And there's even some parts of Shyish that account for telepathy and communication in people's minds, which is going to be a big part of Shyish in this episode. For a much easier one, we have Akshi, the lore of fire, burning winds, and the elemental wind of fire. Their practitioners, called bright wizards or pyromancers, draw Akshi from heat and fire to create. Yep, heat and fire. Look, it seems all very self-explanatory, but keep in mind that Warhammer magic is also metaphysical. So bright wizards also use the metaphysical properties of fire, meaning that someone that uses Akshi can, yes, create fireballs. Akshi doesn't just do that, because fire is also linked with passion, courage, aggression, and purification. Meaning, if you're in a pocket of Akshi, you might get braver, or someone using Akshi can make you unwarrantedly brave, or aggressive, or horny, or all three. And suddenly, that chaos troll with a Slanesh mouth doesn't look too bad anymore. And finally, we have Gur, the lore of beasts, Gatak, Gurak, Gurman, the elemental wind of wood, or the amber wind. Yes, a very creative name for the lore of magic dealing with animals. Basically, Gur hangs out anywhere that's wild, untamed, and instinctive, meaning it avoids civilization. And unlike the lore of life, it doesn't usually hang out just around any life and make everything better. No, Gur is about primal nature, meaning that's all the things about nature we in the modern world are too soft and flabby to remember as natural. Like a venomous snake, a wolf eating a baby deer alive, a majestic lion being eaten by vultures. But it's still nature and ferocity, so it also represents the mongoose absolutely wrecking that snake, a mother deer caving in a wolf's head in vengeance, that lion living a long life of conquest and power. Gur is also about transformation and becoming something stronger than what you were, or becoming some kind of new creature. Gur spellcasters are called amber wizards or shamans, and they're weirdos. They like being way, way, way out in nature, and don't usually show up unless you really absolutely need them and sometimes beg them to show up. But, okay, that's the Warhammer side. So let's talk the system that we're going to be porting spells from. Dungeons & Dragons. Now, while for each edition and each setting, the way the magic has worked has been different, but currently, here's how it works. So, magic, in general, is a weave that covers the entire world, which was set in place at the beginning of time and everything by the goddess of magic, Mystra, who polices magic and also controls what spells exist and have always existed. Now, magic, while reliable and works well, is very hard to learn. And because it's fancy in magic, you have a limit on how often you can use it, which combined means that you need to use a lot of meditation, memorization, otherworldly power, or some unconscious ability to use it well. But like Warhammer, there's 8 types. But these schools are less about powers and variety and more about categories. So let's go through this. The first school is Abjuration, which deals with protecting, shielding, and warding places. Abjuration also deals with yeeting things far away from you and banishing stuff back to where it came from, or so help me. Conjuration deals with creating or summoning nouns, or making them vanish or disappear. Divination deals with revealing and granting information. Enchantment deals with manipulating and changing the mental state and properties of the target, which, in my opinion, is way more evil than it's usually portrayed as. Evocation deals with the creation of energy and manifestation of raw magical force and elemental power. Illusion is about deceiving the senses of people and creatures. Necromancy deals with the ebb and flow of life and death and the balances of life forces. And finally, transmutation deals with the altering and manipulation of physical properties of items and people. Yeah, a lot easier than Warhammer Magic. Also, a very quick note on top of this. D&D Magic has 10 levels, being cantrips, which are technically 0-level spells, all the way to 9th level spells. Those are just the magnitude of power in them. So, then with that, let's get to translating. Now, if you play the Warhammer RPG, I'm not here for you. I'm here for the people coming from D&D. Because, let's be real here, it's a lot easier to find compilations of spells and their effects from D&D rather than the other way around. Now, before we start going through all the spells, you might be sitting there thinking, whoa there, fucko. Couldn't you just match the winds of magic to the schools of magic? I mean, there's 8 of each, right? No. Look, I'll show you why we shouldn't do that by matching them up. So, some of the ones that should line up pretty easily. Azir and Divination, Ulgu and Illusion, and Haish and Abjuration. Now let's assign Gyron with Enchantment just because, Shaish with Necromancy because Death, Akshi with Evocation because damage reasons, Gur with Conjuration because you summon beasties, and Shimon with Transmutation because metal. And sure, I can end it there. These are the equivalents and you're good to go. But there's a problem. Where is the wind magic for Azir? The emotional manipulation and teleportation of Ulgu. Where's the light of Hish? Enchantment doesn't have healing spells, Abjuration does. Necromancy doesn't give you telepathy, and also doesn't have all the spells that Shaish has. Evocation has more range and elements than Akshi, and has 0 impact on your emotional states. Gur also doesn't have the range of Conjuration, and Conjuration doesn't give you buffs. And finally, Shaman and Transmutation have similar differences. So, not a good way to go about this. If you really don't care about the lore, but this is why aren't you talking about this? It's all about the lore and going way too deep on something people don't want to. So instead, let's do this my way. So we're going to start with the cantrips and the easy ones, beginning with the unaligned cantrips. These are ones that can be done by anyone. They would be Eldritch Blast, Mage Hand, Prestidigitation, never going to be able to pronounce that, Thaumaturgy, and Sorcerous Blast. Because all of these are just simple expressions of magic in a Warhammer, with things like Mage Hand being just a utility spell everyone learns. Now, Haish has some obvious light ones, like, well, Light, Dancing Lights, Word of Radiance, Sacred Flame, and Starry Wisp. But given that it also controls Earth and Stone, you also get Mold Earth. Shimon has very few cantrips, just being Magic Stone and Mending. Ulgu has 3, being Encode Thoughts, Minor Illusion for the obvious no does, but Ulgu is also about changing and manipulating minds. So we also have friends. Now, Akshi has entirely obvious ones. Control flame, create bonfire, firebolt, green flame blade, and produce flame. Gyron also has some obvious ones like Druidcraft and Thornwhip, but also Shillelagh since the weapon is imbued with nature's power, and Poison Spray. While Shape Water because Gyron is associated with water. Azir is split between the weather and the future, with the weather and wind side being Frostbite, Gust, Lightning Lure, because lightning is Azir, Ray of Frost, Shocking Grasp, and Thunderclap. And their divination powers give them Guidance and True Strike. Shyish, given that it gives you Mind Powers, gives you Message, Mind Sliver, and Vicious Mockery, but also because of its connection to death, you have Chill Touch, Spare the Dying, and Toll the Dead. And finally, Gur has 2, Infestation and Primal Savagery. And this leaves 6 cantrips left. Acid Splash is an odd one out because there isn't really a Wind of Magic specifically that gives you acid powers, so it can really go into any that lets you make and control caustic substances. So you could say Shaman, Gur, or Gyron. Blade Ward is probably Heish, but I personally could argue it into Shaman. Booming Blade doesn't super fit in anywhere, but I could see the argument of Azir because it's kind of like the wind. But I could also see Shaman, Hish, or maybe even Olgu. Elementalism is because each element has their own wind, with air being Azir, earth being Heish, fire is Akshi, and water is Gyron. Resistance is based on what exactly is happening. Universally, you could say Shaman or Hish, but Akshi, Azir, and Gur are also some good options. And Sword Burst might be Hish, since they're not real swords. I mean, otherwise Shaman. So most of the cantrips will fall under Azir, with a good number also being Heish. But also, since cantrips are usually learned first and are the simplest spells, I think it's kind of cool that the simple unaligned utility spells you learn first are the same ones you'd learn in Warhammer Fantasy. And that they line up with some of the most popular cantrips people tend to take. Mage Hand, Eldritch Blast, and Prestidigitation are all very popular cantrips and are taken by most spellcasters that can take them. Okay, so let's move on to first level. In our unaligned segment, we have Catapult, Chaos Bolt, Detect Magic, Find Familiar, Mage Armor, Magic Missile, Shield, and Tensor's Floating Disc. Again, all useful utility spells that most spellcasters would learn and know. Heish, given its connection to the Divine, gets a ton of spells this level, like Bless, Ceremony, Divine Favor, Divine Smite, Protection from Good and Evil, Sanctuary, and Shield of Faith. And related to Light is Color Spray and Fairy Fire, but they also get Earth Tremor because of their rock connection, and Snare because Heish can also trap and contain people. Shaman only really gets Identify. Olgu, what will quickly become a trend, gets a fuck ton of spells too. They have the ones that deal with fucking with a person's head, like Charm Person, Command, Compel Duel, Dissonant Whispers, Silvery Barbs, and Sleep. And illusions like the Sky Self, Distort Value, Illusory Script, and Silent Image. But that leaves Alarm and Arms of Hadar. Why? Well, because Olgu is also used to set alarms and area detection spells, and also has a connection to some entirely unknown and unexplored part of reality that is beyond the gaze of mortals, gods, and chaos that is filled with monster shadow demons and the lost and abandoned souls of long-lost mortals that none dare to even record the names of in fear of their return. So the tentacle porn spell is Olgu. Akshi has things you'd imagine, like Burning Hands, Hellish Rebuke, and Searing Smite, but also includes Heroism, because remember, bravery and courage. Gyron has Ensnaring Strike, Entangle, and Hail of Thorns for fighting spells, while they have Create and Destroy Water, Goodberry, and Purify Food and Drink for their support spells. Azir's elemental powers include the Arbor of Agathis, Featherfall, Fog Cloud, Frost Fingers, Ice Knife, Thunder Smite, Thunder Wave, Witch Bolt, and Zephyr Strike, which leaves for their divination aspects, comprehend languages. But since Azir can also curse, we also have Bane and Hex. Shyish gives us False Life, Inflict Wounds, Ray of Sickness, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Unseen Servant, and Wrathful Smite. And finally, Gur gives us the ones that make animals like you and makes you more like an animal. The first ones would be like animal friendship, beast bond, and speak with animals. And all the others would be expeditious retreat, hunter's mark, jump, and long strider. Now for the ones we actually have to discuss. Absorb elements is some combination of Heish, Shaman, or Akshi. Since all three deal with energies of some kind, more than what magic already is. Basically with this one, just ask your DM what they think. Cause fear is somewhere between Olgu and Heish. Also, by the way, cause fear is kind of fucked up. Because it makes people aware of their own mortality, essentially giving them an existential crisis, probably in the midst of combat. Which is a really fucked up thing to just casually do to someone and still be one of the good guys. Chromatic orbs is essentially the same as absorb elements, but with all the winds of magic. Because all of the different kinds of magic have elemental powers. Now we get to cure wounds, which can be Giran, Olgu, Akshi, or Hish. All four have limited healing powers and could be first level healing, but Giran and Hish have high level healing. Detect evil and good is between Olgu and Hish because both are particularly good at detecting evil. Detect poison and disease can be Shaman, Gur, or Giran. Gur and Giran because they can be used to detect and source the illness, while Shaman is just generally identified for identification. And Grease is a weird one. Because no wind of magic by itself can help you make lube. At least not explicitly. And no, Lore of Slaanesh is not a wind of magic. But I could see Shaman or Gur. Guiding Bolt is either Heish or Azir, seeing as a form of knowledge and guidance, but is also a bulb of light and represents guidance. And Healing Word is basically the same as Cure Wounds. And doing the same thing we did with the cantrips, we find that the ones with the most popular spells would be Heish and Olgu. No fucking shit, obviously. But going with the popular spells, a lot of them are the unaligned spells that we listed, like Shield, Find Familiar, Mage Armor, and Detect Magic, which again are all things commonly learned by beginner spellcasters in Warhammer. So again, interesting touch if you want to run Warhammer in D&D for some reason, instead of just playing Warhammer. And now to second level. These spare spells would be Find Steed and Flock of Familiars, since they're, again, generally spells everyone knows. This is when we see Heish get binding spells like Earthbind and Hold Person, but also stone spells like Earthen Grasp and Spike Growth. And of course, light spells like Jim's Glowing Coin, Moonbeam, and Shining Smite. Now you also get the religious and spiritual spells and metaphysical properties of light, like Prayer of Healing, See Invisibility, Spiritual Weapon, Warding Bond, and Zone of Truth. Shaman actually gets a good number of spells this time, with spells like Magic Weapon, Cloud of Daggers, Cordon of Arrows, and Heat Metal even resembling spells in Warhammer, while Knock, Shatter, and Arcane Lock are all easily put into Shaman. Olgu also has a fuck ton of spells this time around, with some of the more emotional ones being spells like Calm Emotions, Crown of Madness, Enthrall, Gift of Gab, and Suggestion, or the illusory ones like Blur, Magic Mouth, Mirror Image, Invisibility, Nistel's Magic Aura, Pass Without Trace, Phantasmal Force, Silence, and Spectral Card. And finally, since Olgu is associated with the Shadow Dimension of Eternal Suffering and Darkness, we have spells associated with that, like Darkness, Kinetic Jaunt, Misty Step, Rope Trick, Shadow Blade, and Vortex Warp. Akshi this time around is all fire-based. Agonizar's Scorcher, Continual Flame, Flame Blade, Flaming Sphere, Pyrotechnics, and Scorching Ray. Look, sometimes fire is just fire. No need to overcomplicate things when you have the ability to reduce someone to carbon at a whim. Giran has the Locate Plants half of the spell Locate Plants and Animals, Healing Spirit, Bark Skin, and Protection from Poison. Very support focused this level. Azir's elemental spells would be Air Bubble, Dust Devil, Gust of Wind, Levitate, Rhymes Binding Ice, Snillock's Snowball Swarm, Jesus Christ, D&D, address your fucking names, and Warding Wind. And on the divination side, they have Augury, Find Traps, Locate Objects, Skywrite, and Warp Sense. Shyish has Borrowed Knowledge to talk to dead people, Gentle Repose to preserve the dead, Raven Feeblement because sometimes you need to feeble a motherfucker, and Wither and Bloom in case you want to preserve someone who isn't dead yet. On the mind side is Detect Thoughts, Mind Spike, and Tosh's Mind Whip. And finally, Gur has ones that let you control animals, like Animal Messenger, locate animals from locate plants and animals, and summon beast. Then there's the ones that help you be like that animal, like Alter Self, Beast Sense, Dark Vision, Dragon's Breath, Enlarge Reduce, Spider Climb, and Web, which canonically comes out of your butthole. Now, Aid, being a strong healing spell, is somewhere between Gyron or Hish. Arcane Vigor, since it's making you expend your own life force to heal yourself, would of course fall into the healing magic in Gyron or Hish, but you could also say Gur or Shyish if you want to. Blindness Deafness could be Olgu or Shyish, and this depends on how it happens. Because if you're just summoning a spooky shadow person to plug their ears or cover their eyes, then it's Olgu. But if you're literally making a motherfucker's eyes and ears turn 95 years old, then it's Shyish. Enhance ability, depending on your ability score, can be a few. If you go purely by flavor, it would be Gur. But if you ignore the names they came up with, then Gur or Shimon would be Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, or Wisdom. Azir could be used for Intelligence, Hish for Wisdom, and Olgu for Charisma. But ignoring the visual cues for a second, the physical ones can be associated with the other ones too. You could put Constitution on Garen or Shyish, Dexterity on Olgu, and Strength on really any of them. Lesser Restoration is either Hish or Gyron, given that it's restoring something physically and generally minor. Although with the disease one, you could brute force with Akshi, but that's probably not recommended. There's a lot of things that we treat in the modern day with a fever. Not a good idea on a lot of diseases. Melf's Acid Arrow is the same story with the other acidic ones, being Shimon, Gur, or Gyron. Now for the extra odd one. Nathar's Mischief. See, for this spell, you fill an area with Fey and Draconic magic. Two things that are already pretty indistinct in Warhammer Fantasy, and create an area where whimsical shit starts happening. Like creating the smell of apple pie, flowers to appear, people to uncontrollably giggle, or molasses globs to appear in the air. Which, I don't fucking know, dude. Olgu? Gyron? Both? In a surprise to no one, Olgu has the most spells at second level, representing about a quarter of all second level spells, with Heish as a close follow-up, taking up another sixth of the spells. Which again, not particularly surprising. Now, for the popular spell comparison, things kind of fall apart for the spellcaster progression thing we've got so far. Because some of the most popular spells are for things like Misty Step, Hold Person, Web, Invisibility, and Mirror Image. So we might have to abandon that part of it, especially because the power scaling is massively different. See, ripping a hole in reality and stepping through it is a massive power level in Warhammer. In D&D, it's a basic utility spell you take a third level that's really useful for combat. But anyways, let's go to third level, where the simple unaligned ones would be like Counterspell, Dispel Magic, and Glyph of Warding. Counterspell and Dispel Magic are just things wizards and Warhammer can do. Glyph of Warding, meanwhile, can be done by any lore of magic, and you can learn it, but it's not something every wizard learns or can do innately. Although that might be a good idea. Hey, guys, maybe you should... Oh, right, never mind. But anyways, for Heish, we have your light spells like Blinding Smite and Daylight. You also have Crusader's Mantle for the Holy Feel. And then the protective spells have Intellect Fortress, Magic Circle, and Remove Curse. But you also get the Heish time magic funkiness, because yes, they control the flow of time with haste and slow. And finally, Erupting Earth, Melt into Stone, and Wall of Sand. Shimon has Conjure Barrage, Galder's Tower, and Tiny Servant. But interestingly enough, also Incite Greed. But that's because we've seen over and over again, the Gold Wizard can supernaturally draw people to curse gold and magic items by making them want it. Even though it's never really expressly stated that that's a power that they have, it just happens constantly. Olgu has a ton, like the manipulation ones of Antagonize, Beacon of Hope, Catnap, Enemies Abound, Fast Friends, Fear, and Motivational Speech. Then you have their Eldritch Nightmare spells, where you summon things from beyond or walk through realms unimaginable, like Blink, Hunger of Hadar, Phantom Steed, and Summon Shadow Spawn. And finally are the actual illusions, like Hypnotic Pattern, Major Image, and Non-Detection. Akshi has Ashardalon's Stride, Fireball, and Flame Arrows. Also, by the way, I haven't played D&D since 5.5 release, so I have no idea what Ashardalon's Stride was. Turns out it's fucking jet boosters on your feet. Like, what the hell, 5.5? This is actually just goofy. Gyron's water spells would be Create Food and Water, Tidal Wave, Wall of Water, and Water Walk. They also get Plant Growth, Speak with Plants, and Summon Fae. The Fae is because Gyron's connection to nature in Warhammer has natural spirits, but they're not exactly Fae. Azir's sky powers include Call Lightning, Fly, Lightning Arrow, Lightning Bolt, Melt Minute Meteors, Sleet Storm, Thunderstep, and Wind Wall. Meanwhile, on their divination side, they get Clairvoyance and Tongues. Shyish has Bestow Curse, Feign Death, Life Transference, Revivify, Speak with Dead, Spirit Shroud, and Vampiric Touch, but also Sending. And then with Gur, we have Conjure Animals and Water Breathing. Boring one for Gur this time around. But oh no, what's this? Belagor from out of nowhere with the steel chair. That's right, Dar is making an appearance here too. With Animate Dead, Summon Lesser Demon, and Summon Undead. Because all of these are evil. Like, there's actually just straight up evil. Which leaves 8 spells to talk about. First is Aura Vitality, which is probably Hysh or Gyron, given that it's healing magic. Elemental Weapon is another one of those combination ones, whereas some combination of Azir, Gur, Shaman, and Akshi. Because, changing your weapon's damage could match any of those. Meanwhile, Gaseous Form doesn't really have a place in Warhammer, because there's a lot of spells, but as far as I know, none of them can do that to you. So I'm going to say Shaman, since it's the one that can change your physical properties. Lehman's Tiny Hut, I want to say, is Shaman, but the problem is that it creates a dome of force, not an actual material. So maybe Olgu? But I can't put my finger on it. Although Warhammer Magic can absolutely do this one. And Mass Healing Word is again Hysh or Gyron, while Protection from Energy is similar to Elemental Weapon, but with some Hysh thrown in because it also gives you some protection. Spirit Guardians, being either spirits of nature or Grandpa, is either Gyron or Shyish. And Stinking Cloud, depending on the flavor of the stink, is either Gyron or Gur. But regardless, this is definitely an Orc spell. Or an Ogre spell, honestly. Or Nurgle. Or if you're a real freak, I could see it being a Slaanesh spell. But, okay. This leaves us with, once again, Olgu having the majority of spells. I'm starting to think that maybe just D&D has a fuck ton of shadow magic in it. Although, once again, Hysh is close behind. Or, alternatively, it could be because these two seem a lot more broad when taken out of their original setting. That's also possible. And at this point, the most popular spells have spread out too much for them to be notable for this episode anymore. We're in a position now where we have a fuckload of spells to talk about, but we also are starting to see a weird regression in power levels. Because at second level, we were doing incredibly powerful things for Warhammer, and third level, fireball, stinky gas, and making your sword spit acid. Very impressive. Alright, on to fourth level spells. The only unaligned one we have is Find Greater Steed, which can be flavored however you want. Hysh begins to play a lot more with protection and planar travel at this level, having Banishment, Gate Seal, Mordenkainen's Private Sanctum, and Autoluke's Resilient Sphere. And of course we have Light and Holiness, like Aura of Purity, Font of Moonlight, and Sickening Radiance. And then Stone Shape. Shaman has Fabricate and Summon Construct, both reasonable ones. Olgu once again gets a balance of all of its elements. Charm Monster, Confusion, and Compulsion for all you evil sick sons of bitches out there. Dimension Door, Avard's Black Tentacles, Lehman's Tiny Chest, Phantasmal Killer, and Shadow of Moil if you're kinky and like Shadow Tentacles from beyond time, space, good, evil, insanity, and Hallucinatory Terrain if you're a basic bitch. Akshi gets boring stuff again, Fire Shield and Wall of Fire. Gyron gets Aura of Life, Grasping Vine, Guardian of Nature, and Stone Skin for its nature control powers, and Control Water and Watery Sphere for its water powers. Azir gets more Divination than it normally does, giving you Arcane Eye, Divination, and Locate Creature. They also get Ice Storm and Storm Sphere, but also Freedom of Movement and Gauler's Speedy Carrier as spells that are definitely Azir, but don't have nearly as clear divisions. Shyish gets Blight, Raltham's Psychic Lance. Also, who fucking names these guys? Spirit of Death and Staggering Smite. But also Death Ward, because, yes, being the big bad scary wizard is fun, but you still gotta find it in your heart to help out. And then Gur gets Conjure Woodland Beast, Dominate Beast, non-sexually, and Giant Insect. I'm a bear, I can say that. Dar comes back with the Summon Aberration and Summon Greater Demon, both of which are super evil, both in Warhammer and D&D. Now for the weird ones. The Conjure Minor Elemental is like Elementalism, Air for Azir, Earth for Hish, Fire for Akshi, and Water for Giran. Elemental Bane is some combination of Azir, Gur, Shaman, and Akshi, just like Elemental Weapon. And for the bestest boy, Mordenkainen's Faithful Hound. If it's actually a ghost dog, not only is it sad, but it's also Shyish. If it's not a ghost dog, it's either Olgu, and that's not a fucking dog, or Azir, and you're a furry. Summon Elemental is going to be the same as Conjure Minor Elemental, and again with the acid for Vitriolic Sphere. If it's natural acid, then it's Gur or Gyron. If it's unnatural acid, it's Shaman. And Polymorph is both Shaman and Gur, depending on what you turn into, and if it's a beast inside thing or not. So what about this one? Is the reign of Olgu finally over? No, not really. Although now it's sharing first place with Azir and Hish, which combined can account for half of all spells at 4th level. Which I'm sure is great news for someone wanting to play a gray or white wizard. Also, how fucking weird is it that summoning a Bloodletter and a Bloodthirster is only 1 level difference? Might want to change that a bit if you're running Warhammer and D&D. Okay, 5th level is gonna have some other stuff you might want to address as well. Especially with the unaligned. Because you have Telekinesis, which is something all wizards learn, but also 2 expressions of it that you might want to change the level of if you want to reflect Warhammer. Bigby's Hand and Wall of Force. Because in D&D, they're pretty high level. I mean, 5th level spells are over the curve of overpowered. And there's also Contact Other Plane, which kind of just happens in Warhammer. Other planar entities call you, not the other way around. Hysh gives you holy spells like Banishing Smite, Circle of Power, Commune, Hollow, Holy Weapon, and Summon Celestial, which is kind of questionable because there's not really angels in Warhammer. But you also get light spells like Dawn, Destructive Wave, and Wall of Light, and Binding and Protective Magic like the spell Evil and Good, Hold Monster, and Planar Binding. Oh, and also a Wall of Stone tagged along, I guess. Shaman has Animate Objects, Conjure Volley, Create Spell Jamming Helm, which is not really a thing in Warhammer, but is technically Shaman. Creation, Pass Wall, Swift Quiver, and also Skill Empowerment. Because Shaman does do buffs that aren't materialistic. For once, Olgu doesn't have 1,000,001 spells. Dominate Person, Dream, Geese, whatever, Mislead, Modify Memory, and Yolanda's Regal Presence presents all of the mind represents all the mind manipulations. Far Step and Teleportation Circle are your Shadow Money Wizard Gang spells. And finally, Seeming is your court-mandated illusion spell. Akshi has only Flame Strike and Immolation. Gyron has 3, Reincarnate, Tree Stride, and Wrath of Nature. Azir has, again, mostly elemental spells, like Cone of Cold, Control Winds, Maelstrom, and Steel Wind Strike, but they do also get Scrying and Legend Lore. Shyish gives you Anti-Life Shell, Raise Dead, Rary's Telepathic Bond, and Summon Draconic Spirits for the helpful ones. For the ones that hurt people real bad are a Contagion, Enervation, Negative Energy Flood, and Synaptic Static. And Gur has just Insect Plague. Dar gives you Danse Macabre and Infernal Calling, which is interesting that summoning a devil of low level is harder than summoning a demon of low level, but whatever. Okay, now the ones to actually visit. Awaken, which on top of being a real dick move, is either Gur or Gyren. Like, imagine just being a dog living your best life, and suddenly you're given human intellect and the existential dread and understanding of the world's evils that come with that. Anyways, Cloudkill is really anything with toxic and horrific effects, like Gyren, Gur, Shaman, or Haish. Commune with nature is Gur or Gyren, reasonably, and conjure elementals fits well the elemental ones. Greater Restoration is Haish or Girin, probably, but I can also see Shaman. All three have things to bring stuff. All three can bring things back to normal, but it's probably more Haish and Shaman than Gyren. Jalarzi's Storm of Radiance is weird, because it's a combination of Azir and Hish. And I almost think it should be high magic, but it depends on the balance of Holy and Wind. And finally, Mass Cure Wounds is like the other healing ones, like Gyren or Hish. And Hish has reclaimed its crown of having the most spells, almost a full quarter of them. But hey, Shaman, in a rare stride, is in second place. I'm starting to realize I think the things that Shaman represents, D&D seems convinced is extremely powerful and high level. And, I mean, since it's holy magic, Haish makes sense. But besides Gur and Akshi, the rest have even distribution. So on to 6th level, where our unaligned spells are Contingency, Cray Homunculus, and Planar Ally. Because again, things just kind of call out to you. Haish has the absolutely badass sounding Bones of the Earth, Investiture of Stone, and Move Earth for the stone side, and Fizzban's Platinum Shield, Forbiddens, Sunbeam, and True Seeing. Which, despite how it sounds, Sunbeam is actually more powerful than Daylight, even though to me, a Sunbeam is less powerful than the full force of the sun. But hey, whatever. Shaman gets Flesh to Stone and Globe of Invulnerability. Olgu, once again, has the Horror Show with Arcane Gate, Dramage, Instant Summons, Mental Prison, Scatter, and Word of Recall. But they also continue with the psychological manipulation with Eyebite, Mass Suggestion, and Otto's Irresistible Dance. And of course, Programmed Illusion is here too, in case you want to make up your own way to psychologically scar people. Akshi gets Investiture of Flame. Cool. You tried. Gyren gets Conjure Fey, Druid Grove, and Wall of Thorns. I also gave them Transport via plants because of stuff like World Roots and Beast Paths, but sure, technically it's teleportation, so it could be something else. Azir's elemental stuff is Chain Lightning, Investiture of Ice, Investiture of Wind, Autoluke's Freezing Sphere, Wall of Ice, and Windwalk. And they also still have Divination. Find the path. Yeah, if you're playing a Celestial Wizard, you're really losing out on the divination aspects of the lore if you follow this like gospel. Which, hey, no you shouldn't. Shyish has spells like Magic Jar, which can put your soul in a jar, just in case you wanted to do that. Make sure it's not the cum jar. But less helpful and peaceful are Circle of Death, Harm, Soul Cage, and fucking Disintegrate. And Gur, well, Dark Magic has Create Undead and Summon Fiend. Alright, let's get to the complicated ones. Blade Barrier would be Shaman, if the swords were real. Which they should be. What is it since they aren't? I don't fucking know, dude. Probably still Shaman. Guards and Wards is somewhere between Haish and Olgu, but probably more towards Olgu. Heal would be Hish or Gyren, but I could also see Gur. The Hero's Feast actually doesn't have an equivalent in Warhammer, because there is not just one that makes food. But I would say Gyren or Gur. Primordial Ward is Gyren or Gur, just depending on the exact interpretation you have. Tasha's Bubbling Cauldron, I could see as an unaligned spell, but I can also see that being Shaman. Tasha's Otherworldly Guise might be Dark Magic. Or it's Olgu. Can't really tell, and that's probably not a good sign. And finally, Tensor's transformation, I want to say Shaman, but there's too much possibility of it being another one, like Hish or Azir. And unsurprisingly, Olgu has reclaimed his crown, with a fifth of all 6 level spells, and the usual suspects are the follow ups. Okay, so now we go to 7th level, where you get Plane Shift, which in Warhammer can just happen to you. Of course, you can break into the realm of chaos, which is not advised, but sometimes the gods just decide to yoink you. So anyone can do this. Heish gives you holy magic like Conjure Celestial, which again, there's not really angels, so I don't know what the fuck you're summoning, Divine Word, and Temple of the Gods. But also Crown of Stars, Force Cage, and Prismatic Spray. Shaman has just Create Magen, which is like a little doll creature thing. Olgu again has a lot, like Etherealness, Mirage Arcane, Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion, Project Image, Simulacrum, and Sequester. Which, hey, good job, Olgu. No horrific ways to traumatize people, ignoring Sequester. Akshi has Delay Blast Fireball and Firestorm. Again, no points for creativity here. Gyron gives you Regenerate. Azir gives you Whirlwind and Reverse Gravity, but also Dream of the Blue Veil, which shows you which plane of reality a magic item was made on. Useful, but I don't know how you do that or why you would want to do that in Warhammer. Shyish has Finger of Death and also Resurrection, so you can finger someone to death, bring them back, and then bad finger them to death again. And Gur has Draconic Transformation. Now compared to other levels, 7th has only 5 ones that are questionable. Mordenkainen's sword could be any lore, but I prefer to put either Shaman or Hish. Power Word Fortify, which gives you temp HP, could be any that fortify you, like Olgu, Hish, Gur, Gyron, or honestly Shaman or Hish. Just Shaman or Shyish. Just depends on the visual of what you're doing. Power Word Pain could also be any of the lores, given that all of them can make you hurt real bad. Symbol is a combination of Olgu and Shyish, with the powers being somewhere between the two. And Teleport doesn't work in Warhammer. I guess Olgu, but there's no actual teleportation in Warhammer. Olgu, ever the overachiever, is first, with Heish and Shyish being the runners-up. I'm getting really concerned that D&D is the mysterious shadow realm that Olgu pulls stuff out of. Alright, 8th level. And we don't have any unaligned spells. So Shyish gives us Anti-Magic Field, Earthquake, Holy Aura, Maze, Mind Blank, and Sunburst. Shaman gets Mighty Fortress, where you build an entire fortress from nothing. Olgu gets back into manipulations, with Antipathy, Sympathy, Befuddlement, Dominate Monster, Glibness, and Maddening Darkness. And for Illusion, we have Illusory Dragon, which can actually hurt you, tying it into the other part of it. The Horror Show with Clone and Demiplane. Akshi gives us Incendiary Cloud, Gyron gives us Tsunami, and Azir gives us Control Weather. Shyish gives us Teleport, and Abidalzim's Horrid Wilting, and finally, Gur gives us Animal Shapes. Now we get to Power Word Stun, which, much like Power Word Pain, could be any of them, but I particularly think Olgu, Shyish, and Hish are likely. And again, Olgu has the most, followed by Hish. And now, finally, we have 9th level spells. Now, while you could say Wish is any of them, depending on what you wish for, I personally think it's an unaligned spell, because it feels basically like Divine Intervention. Heish has Imprisonment, Prismatic Wall, and Time Stop. Shaman has Invulnerability. Olgu has Astral Projection, Blade of Disaster, Gate, Psychic Scream, and Weird. Azir has Foresight, Meteor Swarm, and Storm of Violence. Shyish has Power Word Kill, because obviously, and True Resurrection, and finally Gur has Shape Change. Akshi and Gyron doesn't have any at this level. Well, at least not any easy ones. There is Power Word Heal, which is Heish, Gyron, or Gur, while Mass and True Polymorph are either Shaman or Gur. Which again, obvious winner is Olgu. So, now that we have all of that, what was the point of this? Well, I don't know. Look, this isn't the old way, Tad. Not everything has a point. These are just two settings I love and wanted to make an episode porting some D&D stuff into Warhammer, okay? But, alright, if you really want to take away for this episode, it should be that trying to port stuff from one setting to another kind of breaks everything. I mean, think about it. D&D spells, while having clear favorite schools with a lot of spells spread across the entire spectrum of levels and effects, is fairly even. You could play an illusionist, an abjurer, an evoker very easily. In Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, the spells in that system exist within the Winds of Magic and are again pretty evenly divided and equal powered. But when you combine them, the balance is ruined. So you probably shouldn't. And look, I failed in making this episode shorter, but hey, no more promises for next episode. Anyways, if you have opinions, improvements, corrections, and anything else you want to talk about, comment below or email me at waytatpods@gmail.com. That's WAYTATPODS@gmail.com. And remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Follow my podcast feed for audio versions, and come back next time when we try to justify superhuman abilities with science. Have a good night. Don't murder. Have fun. And remember, just because there's a dick-sized Olgu hole doesn't mean you should put your dick in it. This has been Why You're Talking About This, and I've been your host, William. Good night.